I know. Okay, so wine before 10 a.m. kind of makes me sound like an alcoholic. I promise I'm not. But here's the thing. It is summertime, and that means that for a lot of folks, they're going on vacation, right? So you're gonna be going on vacation soon, and that means you're gonna be having wine at 9 a.m. because it's breakfast, and you know what, you can. Or because you're going out and having brunch because it's summertime. And so again, you also wanna have wine with your brunch, and not just a mimosa, but you wanna level up your game a little bit. Also, let's talk about how it's summertime and kids are out of school. And so that means that mom and dad need a little bit of a break. And in my house, that meant that once a week, we would always have breakfast for dinner. Easy, quick dinner, right? And what if you're having breakfast for dinner? You also want to have a bottle of wine. So today on the show, we are talking all about what wines go well with breakfast. And you've probably heard that wine doesn't always go well with eggs. Well, I'm Sarah, your certified sommelier, and today I am here to tell you the tips and tricks of how that's actually not right. You can definitely pair wine with a lot of breakfast foods, and we're gonna dive into it today. Hey friends, and welcome to the Wine CEO. Today we are talking wine and breakfast, and whether you love savory items or sweet items for your breakfast food, I have the perfect wine pairings for you. I know that breakfast looks a little different all around the world, so today I'm going to be talking about some pretty classic American breakfast staples. If I don't talk about one of your favorites though, please don't hesitate to drop a comment, send me an email, or send me a message on Instagram. I would love to give you a personal recommendation for your favorite breakfast items. So breakfast has always been considered kind of a difficult thing for sommeliers to pair wine with. The reason for that is that eggs are a main staple in a lot of breakfast items, at least here in the US. I don't know who decided that eggs means breakfast, but in a lot of ways it is. And with eggs, you have this creamy, fatty yolk. And when you pair that yolk with a lot of styles of wine, it can leave this kind of metallic, really like abrasive flavor on your palate. Definitely not appetizing, not appealing, and not something that you want when you are trying to pair your wine with your breakfast. So it's kind of considered this like Achilles heel, really difficult thing for sommeliers to pair with. But I'm going to give you some great recommendations today of wines that pair really nicely with egg foods. And then I'm also going to pair a couple of other great breakfast favorites as well. Okay, so the main things that you want to look for when you are looking to pair wines with eggs, or really a lot of breakfast items in general, are wines that are high in acid, which is a pretty common characteristic for any type of food pairing wine. Acid helps salivate your palate, and it pairs really nicely with fats, as well as a lot of other characteristics in food. But the other thing you want to look for in a wine to pair with breakfast is a wine with low tannins. So lower tannin structure is going to be a little more easy on the palate, whether it's early in the morning or just with lighter breakfast foods in general. Heavy, bolder wines that have strong tannin structure tend to hold up really nicely to really heavy dishes, really fatty. So when we think about high tannin wines, we're thinking about Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Syrah. These are wines that go really nicely with beef, with lamb, with fatty, cheesy pastas. Not exactly the lighter dishes that we're having for breakfast always, right? So you want to look for wines that are lower in tannin, again, have higher acid. And the last thing is wines that are really great chillable. So you want to be able to enjoy wines at a cooler temperature because those tend to be lighter in style, which is going to be the perfect pairing that you want for breakfast items. A surefire option when you are pairing a breakfast item with a wine is to go with bubbles. And I say this a lot in the show, but bubbles are your best friend when it comes to food and wine pairings. Champagnes, champagne style wines. These wines are going to have high acid typically. The bubbles are going to be really cleansing on your palate, and so it's going to be an amazing option when it comes to pairing with breakfast foods as well as a lot of other foods as well. And I'm not talking about mimosas here. Leave the orange juice aside for a second. I'm talking about just plain champagne or sparkling wine. Enjoy it without the orange juice. It's a perfect pairing with eggs, with a lot of other breakfast foods. Trust me, it's going to be an amazing option when it comes to breakfast pairings. But let's talk about a few other options for breakfast and brunch food and wine pairings. Let's start with one of my personal favorites, smoked salmon. I love salmon lox with cream cheese, onion, capers on a bagel or toast. I just think it's the perfect breakfast and brunch item. Smoked salmon is going to be a delicious pairing with a wine that has a little bit of salinity, so a little bit of that kind of ocean saltwater flavor to it, as well as some great lemon characteristic. So I have two great options for you. The first one is going to be an Assyrtiko, specifically from Santorini. So I love this white wine from Greece. I've talked about it a lot recently on the show, and because it's from an island, it has a lot of those those great salinity kind of characteristics, a lot of great notes of lemon, and it's going to be a perfect pairing with smoked salmon. You could also do an Albarino. That's going to be a little bit more of an affordable option. That's a white wine from Spain. Very similar characteristics. Again, it comes from the coast, so great kind of ocean, seaside notes, salinity, that salt water and citrus, and also a little bit of herb. Perfect pairings with smoked salmon. Now, if you are one of my breakfast or brunch fans that loves sweet items, whether it is Nutella crepes with strawberries like this, or pancakes, French toast, or donuts, my recommendation is going to be Moscato d'Asti. Moscato d'Asti, or Moscato of Asti, the Asti region in Italy, is going to be a delicious off-dry wine, so that means it is slightly sweet. It's going to be a little bit lower in alcohol content, which means you can drink quite a bit of it for breakfast or brunch, which is a plus, but it's going to have really great fruit characteristics, a little bit of that sugar content that really helps balance out your sweeter breakfast or brunch item as well. When you have sweeter items for breakfast or brunch, or really just like dessert in general, you always want to have a wine that is sweeter than the food. If the wine is not as sweet as the food, then it's going to make the food taste really sweet and the wine taste really bitter. So you want to actually have the wine be sweeter than the food so that it still makes the wine taste sweet after you've had a bite of the food. So that's where Moscato d'Asti is a perfect pick, because it's really sweet, has a lot of that residual sugar, and pairs perfectly, especially with donuts. If you just want like an easy breakfast, donuts and Moscato d'Asti is like heaven. If you're in the South like me, or anywhere that you just love chicken and waffles, let me tell you, champagne is going to be your top pick. Champagne and other sparkling wines like Cremant, so a sparkling wine from France that's in any region other than Champagne, Cava, champagne, these are all great pairings to go with fried foods, because the acid and the bubbles help cut through the fat from the fried foods. So when it comes to fried chicken and waffles, you're going to have an amazing pairing with sparkling wine. It's going to be refreshing, it's going to be crisp. Again, it helps kind of counterbalance all of the fats that are in the fried foods, and it's going to be an amazingly refreshing option. Now, if you are just going for some classic eggs, maybe some bacon and toast, my pick is going to be Pinot Grigio, a light white wine that's dry, so no residual sugar, not going to be really full-bodied. It's really light, crisp, and refreshing. Pinot Grigio tends to have great citrus notes, great notes of herb. That's going to be perfect with a really light, basic breakfast item. And again, with the eggs, even though it has that kind of really jammy yolk that has that fat, the Pinot Grigio is not going to give you that metallic-y kind of flavor. It's going to be a really basic, simple white wine option that's going to pair perfectly with eggs. So it's also a really good option if you're having like a vegetarian quiche or something that is like a frittata. Pinot Grigio is going to be an awesome pick for that as well. Now, if you like to step up your egg game and put it on a little bit of avocado toast, which I personally love. If you follow me on Instagram, you know I love my avocado toast. Then I'm going to say Sauvignon Blanc is going to be a great pairing for that. The avocado has a little bit more of that kind of vegetal characteristic, and because of that, I think you need something that has a little more herb and vegetal flavor to it as well. The Sauvignon Blanc is going to be a perfect balance with the citrus notes in it, but it's going to be a really great pairing with avocado toast and eggs. Now let's talk about Eggs Benedict. I love a good Eggs Benedict, and hollandaise sauce is creamy, right? And so you need a wine that's going to be able to stand up to that really heavy, creamy sauce. That's where Chardonnay comes in, and not just any Chardonnay, but a Chardonnay from Burgundy. So you need a white Burgundy, and I think that this is going to be an amazing pairing because the hollandaise sauce is creamy and heavy, and so you need a white wine that's going to have a little more body to it that can really hold up to those creamy, heavy flavors. And white Burgundies tend to have really wonderful notes of toast, vanilla, yellow apple, so a little bit warmer, and they're going to be a little more full on the palate. Typically, they won't be quite as buttery and oaky as you might find in newer styles from California. So I think it's still going to be a little toned down and light enough and approachable to be perfect with a hollandaise sauce with any type of Eggs Benedict. It's going to be a really amazing pairing, and it's a really great white wine to enjoy during the summertime. So it's a great wine to keep on hand. You can enjoy it really for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And this is definitely a wine that, because it has a little more body, it's going to be a great pick if you're enjoying breakfast for dinner. Now, if you are someone who wants maybe not a white wine, not a sparkling wine, you would typically enjoy red, I'm going to recommend Rosè for you. I'm not going to say that there's never an opportunity where a breakfast or brunch item would pair well with a red wine, but typically what you want to stay away from again are those wines that have more tannin structure and would not necessarily be as delicious served really cold. And so that's kind of going to rule out a lot of red wines. So just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to say we're going to stay away from red wines. And when it comes to recommending something outside of white or sparkling, we're going to talk about rosé. And there's some amazing rosés that pair really perfectly with some heavier brunch items. So first up, if you're thinking about like breakfast tacos, breakfast burrito, maybe you're going to have a fattier protein like chorizo or some type of pork sausage. You're going to have salsa. Maybe you're going to have some hot sauce on there. A rosé is going to be a really great option because that's going to help really balance out a lot of the fat and heavier flavors that you're getting in that burrito or that taco bowl. So my recommendation is going to be a rosé that has a base of Grenache in it. So Grenache is a red grape that's a little more medium bodied. It pairs really nicely with Spanish food, a lot of Mexican flavors. And so that's going to be a really great rosé to be able to pair with any type of breakfast tacos or burritos. Now, if you're someone who loves like really savory, kind of Middle Eastern flavors for breakfast, so maybe you enjoy Shakshuka. I love Shakshuka. It's one of my favorite breakfast items. It's like a cooked tomato stew that you crack eggs on top of. You put feta cheese, fresh parsley. You eat it with some pita bread. Oh, it's amazing. So if that's something that you enjoy, I would recommend pairing that with rosés from Pinot Noir. So Pinot Noir you might be familiar with as a grape that has a little more kind of light to medium bodied characteristic, more fresh fruit, sometimes a little bit of earthy flavors to it. There's a lot of great rosé Pinot Noirs that are coming out of Northern California and Oregon that are really great pairings when it comes to any type of those like spicier breakfast flavors like Shakshuka, Mediterranean, Middle Eastern kind of spices. That's going to be a really great pairing as well for your breakfast or brunch item. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that there could technically be some red wines that would go well with some breakfast items, and steak and eggs is probably the perfect recommendation there. Steak and eggs, as you can imagine, you have steak, which is really fatty, a little bit more full in flavor. You might be pairing it with some pommes frites, right? Some French fries and some eggs on the side. This is going to be really challenging because you definitely have an opportunity where if you pick the wrong red wine, it's going to make those eggs taste metallic. And again, you don't really want that. So you want to find a wine that, again, is a little bit lighter in tannin structure, something that is not going to be quite as full in flavor. So if you want to go for red, believe it or not, my recommendation is going to be Lambrusco. This typically tends to be a lighter, fruitier, fresher red wine, and it's really great served chilled. So I think it's going to be a great balance between the eggs, where you don't want to go too tannin forward because of the creaminess of the yolk, but it's still going to be strong enough that it can stand up to the steak and the French fries and be a really refreshing option with breakfast. But if you're willing to go with the rosé option, my recommendation is going to be Rosé d'Anjou. And I talked about Rosé d'Anjou in last week's episode when we were talking about summer wines that are my picks for 2023. Rosé d'Anjou is from the Loire Valley in France, and it tends to have blends of Gruyere, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, some Gamay, some Pinot Noir, Malbec, some other grapes that are indigenous to the Loire region. And I think it's an amazing rosé. As you can see, it has a little bit of a darker color than you might expect from some lighter rosés, and it has really incredible flavor. The tannin structure is still really light and mild. It's intended to be served really chilled. So I think this is a perfect option. Honestly, if you were going to pair it with chocolate all the way to steak, I think it's a perfect summertime pick. Delicious chilled for breakfast or dinner time. So again, this is a great breakfast, brunch, lunch, or dinner wine, and definitely something you could pair with a lot of different options on your breakfast menu. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode and learned a little bit more about which wines pair perfectly with breakfast and brunch items. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I would love to hear about your comments below, as well as any questions you might have about the wine industry in general. You can always send me an email or send me a DM on Instagram. I would love to hear from you all. And until our next video, drink something new and delicious this week, and I will catch you all in the next video of The Wine CEO.